Well, this is a big day for me. I'm here with Big Daddy Don Garlits. This is going to be huge for my YouTube channel. I'm a big drag racing fan. I've been around since the 70s. My dad drag raced in the 60s. I've met Don so many times at Gator Nationals when I was a kid in the early 70s on through. And I actually have a chance to talk with the gentleman today. So, huge fan. You're one of my heroes in life, Don, and I just can't believe I'm sitting here with you, talking with you about drag racing. So tell me what got you into it, and how things arrived through the 50s and 60s to get you to where you are now. I know that's covering a lot of ground, but tell me some of the milestones of drag racing that you thought were important.
Well, my first drag race was on the street.
Nice.
I had just bought this old 40 Ford two-door sedan with $350.
Really?
And I was driving it down Florida Avenue toward home. We stopped this is when Florida Avenue was two-way instead of one-way like now.
Yes.
Stopped at Buffalo Avenue, and this kid pulled up beside me, a friend of mine, and we were both seniors now. We graduated out of the 11th grade, and both were able to have cars. That was about the rule then. The parents wouldn't let you have your own car till you was about 17.
Oh, man.
And so you turned 17 usually going into the 12th grade. So he had this brand new 49 Chevy Coupe. Their family had money, And he said, "Let's race." I says, "What do you mean?" He says, "When the light turned green, step on it." So the light turned green, I stepped on it. And of course, the Chevy was faster because the old Ford was wore out, But it was a thrill. We only raced about 30 feet, it wasn't any big deal. But it was a drag race, a real drag race, and I think that race hooked me. That's what I wanted to do from that point forward.
Wow.
But of course, it wasn't a business or anything in those days, It was just the first, and it would be a whole year later before a group of us went up to Zephyr Hills and got the city fathers to let us have the old abandoned Air Force training base.
Oh, okay.
The Army Air Corps. And we had about 18 of us. There was no clocks, no trophies, nothing. We just marked off the track for a quarter of a mile, and everybody raced everybody, and we just had a great time. Had a cop out there watching us to make sure that we only used that section of the runway that we promised, and didn't go real fast,
Sure.
About 85 miles an hour was top speed. And we would do it up there once a month for a while and do that. I got pictures over here on the wall of the race.
Really?
My girlfriend was taking pictures and I didn't even know it. And I didn't marry her, but somehow or other that little pack, they used to give you the pictures in a little pack,
Mm-hmm.
and that got thrown somewhere. And when we moved from Seffner to Ocala, I was going through some stuff, and there was the pack of pictures. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, my.
From that race.
Unbelievable.
So when we did the book and used some of those pictures, I gave her credit for the photos in there. I don't know whether she ever saw it because I don't know where she's at.
Yeah.
And but then I met my future wife. And of course, this is 52. And drag racers were considered black leather jacketed hoodlums then.
Really?
And I had that Ford that you see in the picture, and I went for the first date. I had met her out at the lake. A friend of mine knew her girlfriend, and he liked her. And the girls didn't go out by themselves, and they usually took a girlfriend with them.
Sure.
It was like for safety,
Of course.
And of course, my buddy knew that, so how was he going to be smooching with his girlfriend in the car if he had another girlfriend? And of course, that's why they went together.
Sure.
So he took me out there to look after the second girl, and the second girl would be my wife someday.
That is neat.
And oh my God, she was beautiful, and I loved her.
It was love at first sight.
Love at first sight. And so I asked, Wayne was the guy's name, and I said, "Wayne, do you know her telephone number?" "Oh yeah." So he gave me her telephone number. I called her up and got a date for the next Saturday night to go to the movies. And I show up at they had a little motel in North Tampa on Nebraska Avenue. Mom and Dad did. And so I pull up in front of the main house. She's sitting on the front porch, and she comes right out and gets in the car. Don't go in to introduce anybody or nothing. And Dad comes right out of the house, and he walks around this Ford, this hot rod Ford, and he leans his head in the window to the driver's side. He was an old German guy she was German, just like me, And he says, "Have her home by 11, boy." And I mean, he meant it. And so
he didn't have a shotgun.
No, we hadn't had a date yet. So anyway, the following Monday, I drove down to Holsinger Motors, which is the Ford dealership in Tampa. It was on Florida Avenue. That was Car Row, Florida Avenue.
Was it?
And my buddy that I graduated with was a car salesman there, and he wanted my Ford because it had a Cadillac motor in it. And he told me, if you ever want to get rid of this Ford, come see me first. So I knew he was a salesman down there, so I went down and I told him, I met this really nice girl, and I could tell that Daddy had a lot of contempt for that car. And I said, I need something stock and modern and calm. He said, I got just a car for you. He had a 54 two-door sedan, and in those days the license plate number indicated the county.
Okay.
And it was from Marion County. She was a school teacher up here.
Really?
I bought it new. And then the new Fords were coming out in 52, the new style, and she wanted one of those new cars. She was single, an old maid school teacher.
Sure.
And didn't have nothing else to do with the money, Bought that new 54, turned that nice bronze Ford in, only had 10,000 miles on it.
Just broken.
Picture of it's over there on the wall.
Okay.
And so the next day I'm in this Ford, and Pat, my wife's name, comes out, gets in the car just like before. The Daddy comes out of the house, walks around the car, and leans in the window and says, I see you got something you can get back and forth to work in every day.
Wow.
Because see, that was important in those days. If you missed a day's work in the old days, you could be fired.
Oh, wow.
If you wasn't really sick or
Sure.
something. And if you was sick, you usually took some kind of a little doctor's certificate or something, or your prescription or whatever. You didn't just call in and say, I ain't coming in today, because they had plenty of people to take your place.
Sure.
This was before all the safety nets and stuff. I tell you the truth, I think it was better.
So how'd the first date go?
The first date, it went fine. She liked me, and it was a double date, naturally. I had to go pick up the other couple, and we went to a drive-in movie, and I had her home by 11. And then the next date we went by ourselves, and that was May of 52. I took her to her graduation dance. In February of 53, we got married.
Oh,
And
that
we were married
quick.
61 years.
Wow.
And I never went to any drag races or nothing with it, all during the dating. And so we were married 3 months. And in March of 53, we decided to pack a picnic lunch and go to the Bach Tower, because the guy was going to be there, was going to play the bells.
The Bach Tower, yeah.
In Florida.
Yeah.
They have a piano
by
console,
Lakeland.
and you hit those keys and the different things hit the different bells. It's beautiful. And so on the way from Tampa to the Bach Tower, you go down Route 60.
Mm-hmm.
And as you enter Lake Wales, where the tower is, there was an old abandoned Army Air Corps field on the right. And it was a tiny little sign by the road that said, Drags Today. And I said, honey, you see that sign? I said, what do you say we go down there and see what's down there? And she says, I'd like that, because I heard all about this drag race, but we never went to one when we were dating. So we pulled down there, and there was a kid on the old dirt road before you got to the runway. And he said, that'll be 50 cents each. Do you want to run it?
Oh, yeah.
My Ford. My stock Ford. I said, yeah. He said, that's 50 cents more. So I give him $1.50, and I'm in the stock class. And I won my class. You see that little angel sitting there?
Yes.
The little on the plastic thing?
Yes.
That's the trophy.
Get out. That is
From
funny.
1953, March.
That's what started out, huh?
And it was really a nice family affair. It was an NHRA club, and there was all the people down there, and the big guy, Richard Hogan, Charlie Hogan, the King, who we had raced on the street back in the day, won the whole race, won a big top eliminator trophy. And boy, that's what I thought. I got to win one of those big trophies. And so my wife and I bought a little 36 Ford. The lady next door had a 36 Ford. We had a little house rented in Sulphur Springs. And the lady next door had a 36 Ford coupe that was just immaculate.
Oh, my.
She bought it brand new and hardly ever drove it. And it was Australian pines, and it was a little narrower way coming into the driveway. And she came in just a little bit too hot on that dirt road, and it skidded, and the front bumper hit the first tree and kind of snapped around it, and the tree is now trapped between the bumper
Oh, no.
and the fender, and it bent the fender in. And she tried to back up, and it couldn't, just spun the tires, and she couldn't go forward. And she come over next door, and she knew I liked hot rods, because I was always working on my 50 Ford. And I'd ask her about this Ford, did she ever want to sell it, you know. And I mean, it was immaculate. She said, you still want to buy my 36 Ford coupe? I said, I do. I said, what do you want for it? She says, $50, but you got to get it off the tree. And so I gave her $50, and a couple of my buddies came, and we just pulled it sideways, you know, and drove it over in the yard. And I just completely ruined it. There's pictures of it up here somewhere. It may be over, yeah, it is in the bottom picture, I see it.
Okay, yes.
I took all the fenders off, channeled it 6 inches over the frame, and put a big hot rod Mercury in it, but that couldn't outrun Charlie. He had a Roadster. And so then I got, a friend of mine had bought a real fancy California Roadster, a Model T Roadster, all cut down and
Lowered.
hot rod motor and everything. It was fast. And he looked at that thing, paid a lot of money for it, probably, I think around $4,000.
Wow.
Which was really something. But this car was worth $25,000-$30,000 today, you know. And he just gathered up an old Model T, stock Model T Roadster, 27, and he had his mechanics here on. He says, make me one just like that from these pieces, the way they did in California. So they took this Model T all apart, and it was just pieces, and they didn't even had any idea what to do next. Those guys weren't near as sharp as those California guys, you know.
Yeah.
And so it just laid there in a big old pile, and it was Dick Schofield was his name, and I knew the guy, especially because a friend of mine helped him tune up the Roadster. We do go over and ooh and ah, you know, the California thing. It was really slick.
What motor was that?
All flathead motors, you know.
Gotcha.
And it had all the heads and everything on, and it was fast. And I said, what are you going to do with that old 27T you got out there, Dick? Oh, he says, the boys were going to make one of those California Zoomy Roadsters, but I don't think they can do it. He says, I think I'll sell it. I said, I'll give you $50 for all that stuff. Oh, he said, I love that. Give me the $50. So I gave him $50, and I took that whole Model T, no engine or rear end. They'd already thrown all that away. It was just the frame and the body and I think the front pieces was there. But we threw all that away anyway. And I took that out to my house. By then we had built our own house, which that's a whole nother story too. That's a funny story. Anyway, So I had a little oak tree out there, and I got me a big long extension cord for $220, and I plugged that into the range plug in the house. Come out the front door to my oak tree, and I plugged my electric welder into that. That welder's over in the antique building.
Really?
And I built me my first roadster right there in my front yard. And
which is out here, isn't it? Don't you have
the
it?
roadster's in the building.
Yeah.
I found it in Georgia years and
Really?
years later. And the only reason I knew it was mine because I had put a special mount I'd made on the steering that had a swing pedal for the brake. And I was up in Georgia at a Model T place looking for parts. And I said, "Do you ever get any 2017 Roadsters in here?" I said, "They don't have to be good. I'm going to make a hot rod out of it." And he said, "You know, there was some guys here a couple of years ago, and they had one of them old bodies, but it weren't no good." He said, "We just pushed it over down in the ravine there." He said, "Go down there and look at it and see if you can use it." And I went down there about 50 feet down in this ravine with a whole bunch of other junk. That's where it all went, see. I said, "Son of a bitch, this is my roadster," but I didn't want to tell him that.
No, of course not.
So I come up out of the hole. I said, "You know, I might be able to fix that. Now, what do you want for it?" "Oh," he says, "why don't you just take," I was buying some other parts from him. "So you just take it out. I don't want nothing for it." So we brought it back here and restored it. That was a find, let me tell you.
Oh my gosh.
And anyway, that beat Charlie, and I got my first top eliminator. Now, this Charlie Hogan is the father of Richard Hogan, the crew chief on the Capco cars.
Really?
That won 5 or 6 world championships in a row.
Who drove that car?
And he was my crew chief for years.
Really?
When I raced. And now he's one of the top crew chiefs in the world.
Wow.
But Charlie was really smart too. The old man was a smart cookie. But he didn't and then I took the body off of it and it turned into the dragster, moved the seat back further, and that originally had a roadster body on it. And when I did that, Charlie didn't like that. He says, "I don't want any dragster." He says, "I like cars better." And he got a 55 Chevy sedan, and that's what he raced for the rest of his life.
Wow, wow. So when did Chrysler come about as far as drag racing? How far into it before you got into Chrysler? Was it early 60s?
Well, the 60s, well, I actually, I got a Chrysler engine in 56, but just for my tow car. And then one day at the races, the dragster was broken. I just timed the tow vehicle, which was a 39 coupe, and the damn 39 coupe was faster than the dragster, even weighing so much. And so I knew right then that those engines should be in a dragster, so I built Swamp Rep 1. And of course, that just changed everything. Yep. First thing you know, I was beating the big guys. From winning, in that picture that you see, the big picture of the dragster, that's me winning the Southeastern Championships that was held in Lake City in August of 1955.
Wow.
And we were members of a little hot rod club called the Strokers. And so my wife, I wasn't an officer or nothing, I was just one of the guys, And I was the only one in the club that won anything, and I won the whole race, top eliminator. And so they had a little tea set for us that the club had took up a collection for me and Pat to have commemorating. Of course, we had a nice trophy from NHRA, And I never forget, the big, tall, blonde, blue-headed guy gave me the trophy. He was the president, and I was just a little short, dark-headed guy, and weighed 120 pounds. And he said, "I guess you'll retire now." I said, "Gene, why would I do that?" He said, "Because you will never beat the Californians." 2 years, almost to the day, August of 1957, I put my wheels out in front of the Cook and Bedwell car the world champion. And it so stunned everybody, they made me race him again. And I beat him again, beat him 2 straight.
Unbelievable.
And that news just spread like wildfire. And of course, then I was at Cordova and I saw all the big guys from California and all the rest of it. This is the World Series of drag racing, one of the oldest national events. And I looked at all those cars. Everything was different in those days, you know. And mine was different from theirs. And there were certain things that I saw in all the different cars. And I said, I'm going to modify my car when I get back to Tampa to what I think is the next generation in Top Fuel. So I came back and changed it all around, the same car, and went right up to Brooksville, went 176 miles an hour, new world record. First car over 170, and the following year went 180 with that car.
Wow.
And those Californians hated that so bad, and they said that nobody ever went 180 with carburetors. It's impossible. And when I restored the car in 1979, I restored it back to the configuration of when it went 180 with the carburetors. I didn't want the blower anymore because that had burned me so bad. And I took it to to Bristol, and I told the track manager, I said, I'm just going to make a burnout. And so I pulled up to the starting line and staged it and made a burnout, but I didn't lift. And of course, that's what we did in the old days. We just burned out right to the end. And I smoked them right through the lights, 182 miles an hour. So much for the naysayers. But then NHRA wrote me a real stern letter, says, we don't want you making those kind of runs. That car has no adequate roll cage, no safety equipment. And for those kind of speeds, you need a different configuration. Now you can make short burnouts, but do not drive it through the lights anymore.
Wow. That's neat.
Yeah.
That's neat. And what year was that?
That was 1980.
80.
When I did that. I restored the car in 79. The first run I made it at Indianapolis, 165, just an easy run at the Nationals. But then when I went to Bristol, I wanted to see what it would actually do. I put 98% in it, like it had always run. Unblown.
Yeah. Well, Gator Nationals, when did you hit the 250 mark? I was there, if I'm not mistaken.
I hit the first 250 at Ontario.
Ontario,
at the
that's
World
right.
Finals, 1975. And that record stood for 7 years before anybody could hit it again.
Wow. Wow.
I took the motor out of the car and hid it at the Seffner shop and put a tarp over it and never let anybody know what was in it. It was too hard. You couldn't, see, I had to make my living match racing. And I couldn't match race and make a living if I had to rebuild the motor every time I ran.
Sure.
My motors would last 3 and 4 months before they had to be rebuilt.
Wow.
I just checked the bearings and would take them apart and put rings in them and stuff like that. But I didn't have to change the crank and the rods. See, we were running a lot of stock stuff in those days. Had aluminum rods with stock cranks and stock blocks. And so finally they figured it all out. And of course, you know now they have to rebuild them every run. I mean, completely.
The last front engine dragster what year was that?
1970. I blew my foot off with that at the Alliance when the transmission exploded. The picture's over there. And I sold the car to T.C. Lemons, and him and Swingle put it back together. And they went out on the road with it, and they were having trouble. And in Bristol again, there was a Spring Nationals at Bristol for the American Hot Rod Association.
HRA.
And so I was getting stir crazy at the house. I hadn't been to any races. I still had, my foot was still wrapped up in bandages, but I was getting around on a crutch pretty good. And I told my wife, I said, I just got to go up and watch the guys at Bristol. She said, don't you drive that car. I said, you don't have to worry about me driving that thing. So I went up to Bristol, and I'm just sitting around watching everything. And they had 4 qualifying passes and 3 runs. Swiggle smokes the tires on each run. He's not in the show. There was one run left, and Swingle told TC, he said, this car is no good anymore. When they blew it in two and we put it all back together, it lost all its integrity. It doesn't have enough flex anymore. And he said, we're not going to be able to get in this show. I said, Swingle, take your fire suit off. We were about the same size. I put his fire suit on, and I'm sitting over on the tailgate, and I'm putting the fire boots on, and Richard Tharp comes up, and his foot was down like that, you know. And I'm putting the fire boot on this one. He said, Big, what you gonna do? I said, I'm fixing to drive that car. I put his foot up here, and the end of the bandage, it's still leaking. It's wet out there, nasty looking out. Oh. And I pull the fire boot over that, and Tharp just fainted. He couldn't stand that. He had a real weak stomach about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I put the thing on, put Swingle's helmet on, and nobody, even to this day, except a few close friends, know that I made this run. They think it was Swingle because I come down there, this Connie on the helmet, you know. Top time, low ET of the meet, #1 qualifier. I go back to the pits and I said, she's all yours now, Swingle. So much for the band. And of course, he just smoked the tires in the first round, you know. And I didn't even tell my wife that I drove it. And but the word spread, you know, in the pits, and it got to Jim Tice, who had me hired for the AHRA circuit, and he was letting Marvin Swartz stand in. Marvin had put Don Garlits on his car and was, you know, because I was hurt. And Tice called me up. He says, I ain't paying Marvin no more to appear as you. You made a run at Bristol, your top speed and low AT. He said, if you want to do this contract, you're going to have to do it yourself. And in the meantime, TC, who owned the car, fired Swingle when he smoked him in the first round. He said, you can't drive anymore. You've lost your touch. And so I told Tommy, I'll drive it for 40% of the gross. And that's the only time I ever drove a race car for him. So I finished the year out for him, never blew another engine.
Never knew that.
And the last race was really the best one. It was at Fremont against the Snake. And we had raced the night before, and I won the match race at the little 8th mile, the South San Francisco drag strip. It was only there. Champion Speed Shop owned it.
Really?
Then the next day we had a big race at Fremont. And on the last run, a pin come out of the blower. This was Lemons had bought a blower from Don Cook, and he didn't put triple pins in them. And the pin come out of that rotor, and the rotors hit together, and it backfired and blew the bottom out of the manifold, and he didn't have any spare parts. So the Snake had a spare manifold, because I'm racing him the next day too. He said I could use his manifold. So we went over to the Cow Palace. The guy had a Top Fuel dragster there, and we used the Snake's manifold, and he had a spare stock blower in the trailer. So we put that on the dragster, and the guy at the Cow Palace had a whole bunch of the rubber lines, so we fixed the rubber lines for the port nozzles. Worked all night and got that thing where it was ready to go, and went out there and beat the Snake 2 out of 3 with that thing, and then took it apart and gave him his manifold back before
that hurt.
And he was pissed to me, tell you. I was thinking the other day, the Snake told me one time, he said, and he told the press this too, he said, Garlits ran me out of Top Fuel. And so I was driving somewhere on this it was to Atlanta a couple of weeks ago. And I started thinking, where did the Snake ever actually outrun me? And I thought, and there was only one time he actually outran me, and that was at a match race at Cordova on one run. He put a wheel out in front of me at Cordova.
Just one time.
One time. And the big one, the big race, was really something else. This was 1966, January. The Drag Racing magazine had this great big trophy. The #1 top fuel drag racer in the nation, and the Snake and Garlits was going to run for it because these were the two top guys. And of course, he made his name in dragsters in the Greer Black and Prudhomme car.
Yes.
They just beat everybody in California. But we went out there and raced him one time with Swingle in the Swamp Rat 3 and outrun them at Lions. Oh, they hated that.
Wow.
So anyway, they had this great big trophy, and then the winner got that, and then the loser got a smaller trophy. And those fools engraved the plates for those trophies before the race. And it was two different plates. The winning plate was different than the losing plate. And they had my name on the losing plate, and the Snake was going to get for sure he was going to win it. He was so tough, at that point.
The bat phone. Is it Prudhomme?
Anyway, Swingle was my crew chief, and I had just stretched Swamp Rat 8 to long wheelbase. And I just had also figured out how to make that 426 run by putting lots of spark lead in it. And we beat the Snake 2 out of 3 there at Half Moon Bay, and they had to swap the plates, and they couldn't put my plate on the big trophy because it was different, so they just laid it up there and taped it on the. It's out there. I can show you. It's in the building.
I gotta see that.
I mean, it was this cutest little blonde you ever seen in your life, and she was so pissed because she was going to go spend the night with the Snake, the winner, and the Snake just hauled ass out of it. He was so pissed. And I was so tickled that I won the race. I drove off of the property without my check. And we were 50 miles down the road, and I said, "My God, we didn't get paid. Turn this son of a bitch around." So we head back to Half Moon Bay, and they're all sitting in the tower having a beer, and they said, "We wondered how long it would take you to figure out you hadn't got your money."
That's good stuff there.
Oh, it's so funny.
Oh my gosh. You were so hyped up, you just forgot about the money, I guess, huh?
Oh, yeah, well, because this was a really big deal. I mean, they for sure thought I hadn't done anything. The 426 had set me back so bad because I had such a nice tune-up set up for the 392s, and I just moved that tune-up right to the 426, and it hated it. And finally, I was at Rockford when I figured it out, and we just got beat the night before at the National Trails, and I told the boys, I said, "We're going to just blow this damn thing up and go home and get our 392 parts." I said, "What good is free motors if they ain't going to run?" And Bob Taft said, "How you going to blow it up? We ain't even put a rod bearing in it in a year." It was just a bull,
Wow.
It was so tough. Well, they built it for NASCAR. It wanted to go 500 miles and be just as strong at the end of the race as the start.
Sure.
And so you had to have integrity to do that. So anyway, we was running 34 degrees because that's exactly what you had to put in a 392. If you put 40, it'd make one good run, but it split the cylinder walls.
Really?
So I said, "I'm gonna give it 40 degrees," and the guy says, "You give it 40 degrees on the first run." Says, "What if it breaks and then we can't make all the runs? We won't get paid." And the guys, if I got my money cut, they got their money cut too. See. So I put this 40 degrees in it. Now, mind you, the night before I was only able to run 813, 192 miles an hour. So now I put 40 degrees in it, and it goes 7.51 seconds, 213 miles an hour.
God.
New world record.
Unreal.
And I come run up to the tower. I said, "Can I see those clocks?" They were, "No, we clicked it off." I said, "That was a big time." They said, "We didn't think it was anything fancy." Says, "We thought you could probably run that good." I says, "If we get any more times like that, you leave them on the clocks." So in the meantime, we had put it up on 2 nitro cans in the front and pulled the pan down to see how bad it was hurt. And the oil looked like brand new. There was no water dripping down. I pulled a couple of bearings that they didn't have a mark on them. I put it all back together and I'm thinking, what have I got here? So I loosened the mag tightening thing and just give it a twist. Didn't even check it with my buzzer.
Didn't even check it.
And tightened it back up. And when I checked it later, I had now had 52 degrees, which just happened to be the magic number. That's what they go through the lights with now, 52 degrees.
Is it?
Son of a gun, that thing ran.
Ugh.
219.81 in 7.31 seconds.
Unbelievable.
Of course, we went to the Nationals in 67 with it and went 222. 6.77. So the 426 just got better and better once we knew how to tune it.
What year was it that the 426 you first used, the first 426?
The first ones?
64?
They sent them to me in 63.
Okay, late
And
63.
those weren't any good at all. The blocks were real weak. We played around with them. But in 64, they actually had it pretty much perfected, and they sent us some that we built. We built a dragster Swamp Rat 8, and of course I was still running the 392. We took it to Bakersfield in 65. The 64 car built in 64, Swamp Rat 8, and Swingle drove it, and I drove the Swamp Rat 6, which I won the 64 car field on Saturday and got the right to set out to run the winner of the 32 car field on Sunday. And the winner of the 32 car field was Marvin Swartz in another one of my cars. And then they had a 16 car consolation race on Sunday, and Swingle was runner up to James Warren with the Swamp Rat 8. So then I beat Swartz and I won the big money, which was $7,500, which was a lot of money back then.
Yes. 65.
And I come home and I get a phone call from Chrysler. My boss, he says, "We want you in the 426 car." This is 65. I said, "Frank, it don't run as good." He said, "It's never going to run as good as long as you got those guys driving it. You got to take it out on the road and work with it." Okay. So we took it out on the road, and like I say, we struggled and struggled with it. It just wouldn't do it. I got beat in the first round at most all of them. It would qualify, but I couldn't go anywhere with it till I finally bumped that spark up. And I don't know why I never bumped it up sooner, but I was just so many guys, I'd blown up so many 392s, they'd race me in the final round, and then they jacked the spark up, to try to beat me. And I'll never forget, I was at Bakersfield on that final run, and it was Vance Hunt.
Okay.
Borrowed the motor out of Don Cook's car. He'd blown his up with a lot of leads, and now it was time to race me. And he said to Cook, he said, "If I tear it up, I'm gonna get you another nice 392 block." And he says, "I understand that." He says, "Do you mind if I put 40 degrees in your 392? He said, "You can back it up 2 degrees if you want to." He already had 42 in it.
That's crazy.
Cook, he ran them hard. Cook used hydrazine, and we used to say, "If the flames are green, Cook will be mean." Because when you run hydrazine, it turns the flames green.
Yes. Unreal. So that was the first 426. I mean, you got it perfected in a couple years to where it was as good as the 392.
Yeah, it was a 2-year period of overlap there where we were trying to run the 426 and they were still running 392. But when I won the Nationals in '67 with the 426 and ran the 6.77, that was the end of the 392s. Because he wasn't even hurt. And a lot of people started getting them after the 219 run at Rockford, because we didn't hurt anything. Keith Black called up and called Centerline and said, "What's it going to take for me to be the 426 distributor on the West Coast?" And the parts guy at Centerline said, "You heard about Garlits' runs yesterday?" And he said, "Yeah, and somebody said it didn't even hurt anything." And the guy said, "That's right." And Black said, "Well, what's it going to take for me to be the distributor?" He said, "You'll have to take a tractor load of 426s." He said, "Send them." And of course, he later made an aluminum block for the 426 with a Chrysler part number on it. So he got really tight with Chrysler.
Wow. What that 62 Dart that you have out there, the red one, what's the story on that car?
Well, I had one of those. I got one of the first 13. That was when I went to work for Chrysler officially. They called me up there in '61, and I met Frank Wiley. I actually worked with public relations. I never was in the racing part.
Oh, really?
PR. And they had one of those, and they gave me one. And then I turned it in when they made the white one. I had a white one with aluminum front end in '63. And I never could find the '62. And then I was out in Texas, and I found this really nice dry body, the same car, but just a 318.
Yeah.
So I bought it and brought it back here. And that's all they did. They were just regular cars, and I knew exactly what all they changed to make it into what they called a Max Wedge car. And so I put a 426, a 413 in it, and that Dan Dvorak, he's dead now. He was really big. Remember him?
Yes.
He built the engine for me.
Really?
And no dyno Dvorak, they called him, and that thing did run good. And I painted it red like it originally was, And my wife drove the original one, and she won a lot of trophies with it.
I saw that.
Push button. And so we put it in the booth there with her, and she had all the trophies. She saved them all. And that's like her booth back there, It's kind of nice. And it really runs good. And I've taken my daughters for rides in it at the race all the way down, and it runs about 113 miles an hour.
No slouch.
In the 12s.
Which is quick.
Yeah, that was about what they ran then.
Well, going back to Dan Dvorak, I've got a couple of pictures of his '63 Max Wedge convertible. Remember the red one? It said Dvorak down the side of it. I got some of the original pictures from back then.
What all happened to all his stuff?
I don't know. I went to his shop. I was interested in one of the wagons. I love those early '63 wagons.
I know his wife and him got a divorce before he died.
Yeah, and
so no telling
he had a sale.
He had a daughter.
But he had a sale and sold a lot of it, and I went up there and a lot of it was already gone.
Did he lose a leg or something because of diabetes?
I think so. He was run what you brought, super
really
good guy.
Him.
It's neat that you brought his name up because I got pictures of his cars, and he always sticks in my mind. Going back into the Gator Nationals, I started going in '73. I was just a little boy, 11 years old, and 12, and I just loved drag racing, and I always would steer towards you because you were the man in the day. You had all the top ETs, low ETs, top speed, and I just kept on coming. I got a bunch of pictures that I need to find. They're just old Polaroids that with you, with Shirley, the early days of drag racing, and to get to sit here and talk with you about you know, the
It
start.
ain't the same as it used to be, is it?
No,
They
I don't watch
changed
it. I don't watch it as much. They took the super stock racing away. I love the old super stock cars. That's one of my favorites. When they took that away, you know, they used to run those on Thursdays, you know, and they don't have them anymore.
Yeah.
But I was just at Speed World at a NMCA event, National Muscle Car Association event.
Are
they
they
had
doing pretty good at Speed World?
yeah, they had a real good meet. There was a lot of Mopars there, a lot of the early wagons.
That's good.
The early Mopar wagons.
That's where I did all the testing, you know, for the rear engine car.
Really?
3 months I tested before I got down the track.
Did not know that.
Almost gave up on it at one point.
Wow.
Wouldn't that have been a lick?
So the Spruce Creek dragway, how did you run there through the years?
Yeah, well, that's where I went over there when NHR had that first NHRA Winter Nationals,
Yes.
and I won one. There was a deal where top speed was the big deal, and I ended up with top speed of the event, which because they call it Speed Week, it was about speed, and the Eliminator Trophy, which was a smaller trophy, went to Lewis Carden because he won the most nights, because I could only go over for 2 nights because I had a shop. I couldn't be there every night during the week.
Sure.
So I won 2 on the weekend, but that he won more, so he got a smaller top Eliminator Trophy. And I got the big one. I got pictures of it somewhere in one of my books. And the first night there, I won my class, and then I had to run Lewis Carden for the final. They used to run different classes for top eliminator, and so we're all up there staged, and the flagger pointed, and Carden jumped, and then of course I moved forward a little bit too. Then of course you waved the red flag. And in those days you got 3 jumps, so I drove out around with my gas car and come back around, and I heard Carden's motor shut off. I was just going to restage and do another start, you know. And the announcer says, Garlits has been disqualified because he crossed the center line. I said, I crossed the center line after the guy flagged the red flag. The race was over. I was coming back. You crossed the center line. You're disqualified. Carden's going to single. And we're sitting, and Wally's leaning in the cockpit trying to explain this to me, and Carden's engine starts. And it says, Carden's going to single for the trophy. I said, like hell he's going to single. And I gave a signal like this. Art Malone was driving my Cadillac push car, and Wally Parks is trying to lean into my cockpit and tell me, no, no. And then Art don't give a shit about him. He don't even know who he is. And Art pushes me off. He only pushes just a few feet, you know. Wally has to grab that hood ornament on the Cadillac and pick his feet up while my car starts to keep from getting run over.
Oh my gosh.
Of course, it started, and I'm coming up to the starting line, and Carden's underway, right? And I just stepped on it right back there and just started smoking him back at the starting line, and I chased him down, passed him about 3/4 down, and the announcer says, Garlits wins, but Carden still gets the trophy.
Oh no, that's terrible.
So they brought me the top speed and low ET and the class trophy for that night, and I just threw them on the ground and stomped them. And I said, I won't be making that mistake tomorrow night. So the next night I came out and I won handily, and the next one I won again. And so then on Sunday night, I get the big trophy, and they put all my little ones back together and fixed them. And so I got all the little trophies and all in the big one. It's so funny.
That was a 2-year thing at Spruce Creek? Was it 2 or 3 years?
Just 1 year.
1 year. That was
The
only
following year
one
they
only.
went out to California, had the Winter Nationals at Paloma.
That's right.
This was 61.
Wow. That was 62 was the year. It was at Spruce Creek, correct?
62 was at Pomona.
Oh, okay. So 61 was
At Spruce Creek.
at Spruce Creek.
But then we went back to Spruce Creek only with the super stock. and did some super stock racing there. They had some super stock events.
Yeah, my dad used to race there. My dad's brother had a Chrysler dealer, a Dodge dealer, back in the day, and he was getting those cars, and he had a bunch of those trophies. I don't know where they went. He's passed on now, but really neat stuff. Well,
All right, I'm going to have to get going.
all right, Don, it's been a pleasure.
You
And
bet.
man, I tell you
Always a
what,
pleasure.
you just made my
Come back
day today.
anytime.
I will. And thank you all. Hope you like this.